Hello and good afternoon and welcome to this webinar. Maintenance of railway vehicles, what's new and what you need to know. I'm Torsten, Communication Officer at ERA, the European Union Agency for Railways, that is hosting and organizing this webinar. The European Union is determined to improve rail safety. That's why ERA will deploy several activities in the European Year of Rail 2021, which our director and my colleagues will show you today. How can rail companies concretely embed safety in their organization, especially maintenance activities? ERA's Executive Director, Joseph Doppelbauer, and my colleague Bart Acou, Head of Safety Unit, and Nathalie Duquesne will explain why maintenance of vehicles is an important topic. They will discuss with representatives from the sector, benefits, and practical implementation of these projects. I wish you now a very fruitful webinar, and for those who cannot attend, I remind you that this webinar is recorded and it will be available on our website and YouTube channel later. Now I give the floor to you, Nathalie, to facilitate the discussion.
Thank you a lot, Torsten. Good morning, everyone. I'm Nathalie Duquesne, Project Officer at the agency and responsible for the implementation of the ECM Regulation. Today, I'm very happy to say that we have invited important guests, ECMs, but also keepers, and also ECM certification bodies, accredited, and one NSA. First, let me give you some details about the organization of this webinar. Together, we will have a short presentation of the ECM team in the safety unit. And during the webinar, you can, of course, ask questions using the chat function, which you will find at the top right corner of your screen. You can also tag questions from other attendees, which you judge valuable by clicking the sum icon. It will be useful for us to prioritize some questions. Now, I would like to give the floor to our Executive Director, Mr. Joseph Doppelbauer. Please, Joseph, the floor is yours.
Merci, Nathalie, and also from my side, very good afternoon to you and welcome to this webinar on maintenance of railway vehicles. When a railway vehicle is used, it will be subject to wear and tear or may get damaged and therefore will not remain fully conform to its design operating state. The goal of maintenance is to restore this vehicle in its design operating state. Entities in charge of maintenance, also known by the acronym ECM, therefore play an important role for safety in the European railway system. All railway vehicles, both for passengers and freight cars, must have a designated ECM. The ECM ensures that the vehicles for which they are in charge are in the so-called safe state of running by means of an effective system of maintenance. On the 16th of June 2019, the European Commission introduced the new implementing regulation 2019-779 to replace the former regulation 445-2011. This new ECM regulation extends the scope of ECM certification to all railway vehicles covered by the Railway Safety Directive. It also introduces requirements for manufacturers and ECMs to manage safety critical components. The ECM regulation sets out the criteria to be applied for the accreditation or recognition of ECMs and the requirements and assessment criteria applicable for the certification of ECMs and the certification of maintenance function. The new regulation entered in force in June 2019, and the clauses of the new ECM regulation should have been applicable as from 16 June 2020. However, We had the COVID pandemic in 2020. Therefore, it has been appropriate to allow for more time and to adopt transitional provisions. For instance, Article 4, which is the one on safety critical components, shall now be applicable as from the 16th of June 2021. As Nathalie has mentioned, our webinar today is intended to give an overview of the subject with a focus on the elements that are new in the new ECM regulation. It is an opportunity to present this point and to discuss the subject. We will have panelists from the sector, from ECM certification bodies, and from NSAs. Now, at this stage, I hand over to Bharata Ku, the head of the Safety and Operations Unit here in ERA. Please, Bart, take the floor and present the main objective.
Thank you, Joseph. Like you said, just a technical problem. Okay, like you said, the primary goal of maintenance is to restore a vehicle in its design operating state. The entity in charge of maintenance is therefore an important player in railway safety and shall ensure that the vehicles for which it is in charge are in a safe state of running by means of a system of maintenance. Taking into account the wide variety of design and maintenance methods, but also the fact that the activity consists of people, processes, and tools, all working together to operate and maintain railway vehicles, such a system of maintenance can only adequately function when it is process-oriented. This was clearly recognized already in the 2011 regulation on the certification of ECM for freight wagons, with the introduction of the 4 ECM functions to cover this. A first function which supervises and coordinates the maintenance functions and ensures the safe state of the vehicle in the railway system. A second function, which is responsible for the management of maintenance documentation, including the configuration management based on design and operational data, as well as on performance and return on experience. A third function, which manages the vehicle's removal from maintenance and its return to operation after maintenance, and a fourth and last function, which delivers the required technical maintenance of vehicles or parts of it. Now, the main purpose of the certification system was to provide a framework for the harmonization of requirements and methods to assess the abilities of the ECMs across the European Union in order to ensure the delivery of functional vehicles to the customer at contracted levels of availability and reliability. Unfortunately, still, when I read accident investigation reports, I can only conclude that many undesirable events in the railway system continue to have their origins related to maintenance, the maintenance of railway vehicles. This emphasizes not only that the maintenance of railway vehicles is a critical process from the point of view of safety, but also that having a system of requirements in legislation is not enough. The system needs also to be implemented adequately, with all involved actors in the entire railway system taking up their responsibility, with the common objective of maximizing the whole life value of railway vehicles by optimizing operations and maintenance. When it comes to maintenance, the complexity within the railway system lies not so much in the technical aspects, though this may be complicated, but rather in the interactions and relationships between the different stakeholders, from railway undertakings over material suppliers, loaders, and back to entities in charge of maintenance and their certification bodies. They all need to align their often competing goals and short-term concerns in order to deliver the overall system goal, safely transporting passengers and freight on time. This will require greater cooperation and communication between all stakeholders. Optimizing the whole life service performance of railway vehicles in a cost-efficient way is a critical success factor for sustainable and safe performance of the entire railway system. To achieve this, the dependencies between the various functions in delivering the operation and maintenance services have to be established, and relevant safety have to be understood and accepted by all involved stakeholders. And between them, information flows have to be established, and relevant safety and performance-related information needs to be exchanged in a proactive way. As we will see today, the renewed regulation on the certification of ECM, applicable no longer only for freight wagons, as you said, but for all railway vehicles, provides the necessary framework for this. The challenge will be to put it in practice. And I'm convinced that at least our guests today have already a good idea on how to do this. So I'm happy to give the floor back to Natalie and the team to continue with the presentations.
Okay, thank you, Bart, for the summary of the maintenance activity. Now I'm very happy to give you some general points concerning the maintenance of highway vehicles, what is new and what you need to know. So, first, we speak about maintenance of vehicles. I'm sure that you know that before, with the regulation 445, it was a regulation for ECM maintaining the wagons, but now with the extension of the scope, we have to say that each vehicle shall have an ECM, and it will be in this extension the fact that the ECM has to follow some requirements that you can find in the Annex 2 of this revised regulation. It means that for locomotive, train set as electric or diesel multi-unit, but also for on-track machine, there is a need that the ECM maintaining this type of vehicle shall have an ECM certificate or shall apply, they shall to be assessed to see if the ECM fulfill all the requirements that we have in the Annex 2 of this revised regulation. As I explained just before, it was important to say, what do you have to know today? The main point highlighted by Bart before, it's reinforcement of exchange of information. In this slide, you can see the different actors. We have highway undertaking and infrastructure manager, but we have also the authorizing entity, the National Safety Authority or the agency, but we have customer who had transport contract, renting contract with the keeper, and we have ECM, entity in charge of maintenance. This ECM will be certified by an ECM certification body, and what it is important, they have also to exchange information with the manufacturer. The manufacturer has to provide to ECM a list of safety critical components, but they have also maybe in some cases to ask to ECM the support on request, that it was important, but also to the keeper. What I put in this slide to highlight this reinforcement of exchange of information, it's, you can see like a bus around all these actors. There is a real need to make a dialogue on safety critical component, and there is a real need to exchange of information between these different actors. Entity in charge of maintenance. I'm sure that you know what it is, the maintenance system, and I'm sure that you know the ECM is composed of different functions. There is no change in this maintenance management system in the revised regulation. You have always the ECM function 1, dealing with the maintenance management of all the functions. We have the ECM function 2, concerning the maintenance development, ECM functions 3, dealing with the fleet management, and ECM function 4, where we have the maintenance order, the maintenance workshop delivery. What it is new also in this revision of the regulation, we had to revise the previous accreditation scheme and certification scheme. I can say that in these two schemes, there is nothing very new. We have, of course, because the regulation 445 was in 2013, we have to revise some standard, but we have also to revise some competencies, because at this moment, when you are an ECM certification body, you have to check the maintenance done by the ECM, not only for wagons, but for other types of vehicle. This accreditation scheme and certification scheme has been voted and accepted by the European Corporation for Accreditation, that it was very important, and it was done in November last year. What I would like to highlight on these two schemes, accreditation scheme contains requirements to be used by national accreditation bodies or by recognition bodies when assessing certification bodies performing ECM certification. It shall be also used by the member state when designating the national safety authorities to act as ECM certification body. That it was also important. The certification scheme shall be used by all ECM certification bodies. And in the link after, you can find the accreditation scheme, but also the certification scheme. Why we are so strict with this application is because at the end, the certificate of ECM is an European certificate. And to have this as European certificate, we have to harmonize the process concerning the ECM certification bodies. Now, some words about the system of certification. As I explained just at the beginning, what it is important to know is the Article 3.1. All ECMs shall satisfy the requirements of Annex 2 in respect of all vehicles, subject, of course, to safety directive. In this part, we can have three cases. First, the case 1, entity applies for becoming ECM for freight wagon. For this, no question. The certificate for this type of ECM is mandatory. And the compliance with Annex 2 to be checked via the ECM certification process. So, ECM certificate issued by certification body, and in case of this ECM is also a railway undertaking or an infrastructure management, the ECM certificate is as an evidence or presumption of conformity for compliance with the part dedicated to the ECMs. Another case, when entity applies for becoming ECM for vehicles which are not freight wagon, but when the entity has the role of highway undertaking or infrastructure management. But what I have to explain, in this case, the entity maintains vehicles exclusively for their own operation. In this case, the entity may choose between two possibilities for Annex 2 requirements check. 1. It will be possible to have compliance with Annex 2 check via safety certification and authorization process, and the compliance registered by either NSA or the agency in the safety certification or authorization, or they have a second option. They can use or they can ask for an ECM certificate. It will be a voluntary certificate following the ECM certification scheme, and with that, we can say that we will have the compliance with Annex 2 with this voluntary certificate. And the third case, if it is not the case 1 or the case 3, it is for all the other ECM, not highway undertaking, no infrastructure manager, and maintaining other types of vehicles and freight wagon. For them, the certificate must be mandatory. Other new points that you need to know with the revision of this regulation, we have introduction of safety critical component. As Mr. Doppelwer explained, the Article 4 dedicated to this point shall apply from June this year. What we can say about that? Safety critical components are components for which a single failure has a credible potential to lead directly to a serious accident, as defined in Article 3, Part 12 of the Directive 26798. On this, you can find in the guide some information about the safety critical component, and we are waiting also the work of Sensenelec to provide to all the sector a methodology dedicated to this safety critical component management. What we can say also that because we would like to highlight the need of communication, the ECM shall use the Safety Alert IT tool to inform the rail sector about new or unexpected safety relevant findings concerning the maintenance activities. It's also in the Article 4 and it shall apply from June this year. Another point, we have now as annex a template to give ideas or to give also requirements that what we have to find in the annual report from ECM to certification body, and it is in the annex 5. Now, because we are a team, I would like to give the floor to Alexandra to give some information on what we can find in ERADIS. Alexandra, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. I would like now to tell you a bit about where you can find all this information that Natalie has just mentioned. As probably you know, the agency holds several registers, and one of them is ERADIS, which you will find under the address which you can see here on the slide, eradis.era.europa.eu. And there you will find several different documents, and there is a specific dedicated part related to ECM information, and you will find there, first of all, the schema chosen by each member state, so either accreditation or recognition, or the NSA as the ECM certification body. And in this little map, you will see the summary of the choices of different member states. You see that those highlighted in yellow or light orange are those countries in which the NSA is the authority acting as ECM certification body. We have 22 member states with such case and 4 OTIF non-EU contracting states. In green, you will see some member states who have selected accreditation for this part. We have 3 member states, and Switzerland, Norway, and the UK. And in general, we have 19 accredited certification bodies. We have also in blue the countries that have selected recognition. So far, we have 3 such member states, and we have 3 recognized certification bodies in these member states. And in the purple pink color, you have the countries in which we have the NSA and accreditation system. So we have 4 member states that have selected this. You will find the list of all the certification bodies in ERADIS under the relevant menu item. And also, you will find in ERADIS, the most important thing, the ECM certificates issued by all the certification bodies, because they all are recorded in ERADIS. And here you see a little summary of the situation with certificates as of May this year compared to December last year. So in total, we have an increase, of course, in all the certificates. We have 488 valid ECM certificates, and we have 572 valid maintenance function certificates. For freight wagons, there has been not a huge difference compared to December, because the certification for freight wagons was already mandatory in the previous regulation, but you can see that there was quite a lot of increase for locomotives, for EMU, DMU, for passenger cars, and for OTMs, which are the new categories of railway vehicles that need to be certified as of next year. And for maintenance functions, you will see a similar raise in the number of certificates. With this, I will hand out now the floor to Nicola, who will tell you more about the ECM guide. Nicola.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Natalie and Alexandra. Just a few words about the new ECM guide. The guide was officially published on 21st May 2021. A task force was organized by ERA, and the meetings were on the 10th December 2018 and on the 11th February 2020. Others remote meetings were also carried out. The task force was composed of 3 accredited certification bodies, ERC, Sconrail, and Belgorail, 7 NSA, Germany, Ireland, Poland, Sweden, Italy, Norway, and Luxembourg, 4 sector representatives, CR, UAP, UNIFE, and EPTOLA, and 1 Sensenelec representative. The version 9 was consolidated and uploaded on extranet at the end of March after the revision of the comments received on the 1st December 2020. The key points are clarification of Article 3, System of Certification, and Article 10, Certification of outsourced maintenance functions. Clarification for ECM assessment during SMS assessment, safety critical components methodology in Chapter 13, safety alert IT tools. A guide focusing on this point will soon be available. Annual ECM report. In the following slide, there is the web page dedicated to the certification of entity in charge of maintenance, and scrolling down under the point-related guidance, the PDF file called Guidance on ECM Certification Process. The file is downloadable and ready to be used. Just as a reminder, the guide is non-legally binding guidance of the European Railway Agency. Thank you. Natalie, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Nicolas, for this presentation of this important guide that we put on our webpage. Now, the time is running, and we are very interested to hear the feedback from the sector. So, as I explained at the beginning, we are very happy to welcome our panelists from the sector. We will have Gilles Peterhens, Secretary General of UIP. We will have also Jean-Pierre Gillien from SNCF, responsible for the rolling stock. Fabien Schmidt, an ECM accredited certification body. Francis Parmentier, an ECM accredited certification body. But also we have Mr. Kamperman, acting as NSA, also as ECM certification body, and we will have also the feedback of Geoffrey, who is an ECM for CFL Cargo. So now, please, I would like to ask you a question, Gilles. As Secretary General of UIP, what do you consider to be advantages of this new regulation 779? Please, Gilles.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Natalie, for the invitation. Thank you, the agency, for the invitation. I don't know if I'm live, but I assume I am. Otherwise, I will receive a corresponding message. Thank you, Cyril. Yeah, perhaps first, before going into the advantage, just a few words who I am and who is UIP, as some of the attendees may not know us. UIP is the representative bodies of the freight wagons keepers. And as such, we represent 200,000 freight wagons running across Europe, to make it short. Advantages of the ECM regulation. Before doing that, because I didn't really fully agree with Bart and Joseph, what they say at the beginning, on the ECM, let's say the introduction of the ECM certification. In fact, since 2008, every vehicle in Europe needs to have an ECM, so that's not new. The certification is new for all vehicles, but what we did at the first time for the ECM certification, what we wanted to do and what we still do and what you presented, Natalie, on this Article 3.1 is we need to close a gap. Fully agree with Bart on this. Maintenance of vehicle is important, and we need to close the gap in the SMS of the railway undertakings because they need to be sure that the vehicle they integrate in the train and in a safe state of running, and that's why we have the ECM certification. So that's the first advantage, I would say, closing a gap in the SMS of the railway undertakings. The other points, perhaps, which are very relevant in the ECM certification for us as representative of freight wagons, the new regulation closes the gap between freight and passenger. So that's also positive, as we are now under the same rules for certification and especially under the same harmonized rules or requirements for defining the competences of ECM. And I think that's one of the big achievements. And if we look back to the 2011 regulation, it was the first time we had a European certification on one of the activities in the railway safety at European level. Having harmonized requirements is one of the big advantages, but also having a platform to discuss, let's say, and avoid the national approaches towards the competences of ECMs or of companies active in vehicle maintenance is a big advantages of the new regulation. We have an extended scope, as it has been mentioned a couple of times, but in fact we have the same principle as for freight wagons. So we have been living with it since May 2013 now. And I think what we have achieved, and if you look on ERADIS, you will find also some decision or so-called recommendation for use, which have been published in order to harmonize a little bit the understanding of the requirements in the ECM regulation. It's still a legal text, which is complicated sometimes to understand in practice. So I think the ERA platform is also a good advantage or a nice advantage of the regulation. I agree with Bart as well. Implementation is the challenge, and when we say implementation is a challenge, I think on safety critical components, but also on site, we will still have discussion on how to implement it. We are making progress from our side as UIP. We will this week publish a guide on safety critical components for freight wagons, and I look forward to discussion also with my colleagues from the other representative bodies at European level and with the agency on this new concept of safety critical components. We might think that the ECM regulation is another burden, and in fact it is, but it's a necessary one. I think the achievement or achieving the single European railway area is not possible without ECM regulation and will not be possible in a liberalized rail passenger market without the extension of scope of this ECM regulation. So I think the regulation 2019-779 is here to stay and will bring us as a whole sector towards the single European railway area, perhaps even faster as we may think. So that would be, in a nutshell, what I see as advantages for the new ECM regulation, available for any question if they have.
Okay. Thank you a lot, Gilles, for this explanation. The reminder of the first regulation. Thank you very much for that. Now, I would like to give the floor to Jean-Pierre, who is the chef de division organe de roulement at SNCF. Jean-Pierre, for you, what importance do CER members give to the ECM certificate?
Hello, Nathalie. It's a good question. Good morning. Good afternoon, everybody. I would say for CER members, ECM certification is very important for the whole sector, for the whole railway sector, and that it is obvious for three different reasons: safety, common rules, and costs. ECM regulation clarifies what is expected from the agency in terms of maintenance, organization, and responsibility. The Annex 2 is a real help for the railway actors in order to organize the maintenance of their vehicles and to deliver it properly. The advantage of the ECM certificate, I would say, is to converge to the same standard of common rules for maintenance management in a frame of interoperability and open market. The certificate is now, as the certificate is now mandatory for all ECM, it improves the safety level for the railway sector. Even if tools, methods, or maintenance plan can change from an ECM to another one. This is very important for us because some vehicles may circulate through the different member states under the responsibility of several railway undertakings. And above all, a same vehicle can be maintained throughout Europe by several maintenance workshops. ECM regulation clarifies also responsibilities between the various involved parties, and it requires a single entity to be responsible for the maintenance of vehicles. The ECM certificate is a good means for allowing keepers and railway undertakings to ensure that the entity in charge of their maintenance has all the skills and the capacities to maintain their vehicles properly. At last, for outsourced ECM activities such as development, fleet management, or maintenance delivery function, an ECM certificate, where it is obtained by a subcontractor on a voluntary basis, can reduce cross audits and assessment burden of its customers by offering a single label recognized by all ECM, even if an ECM shall monitor its subcontractors' activities. For these reasons, ECM certificate is also a good opportunity for saving money. This is how CER members consider ECM certificate. Nathalie.
Okay. So, thank you, Jean-Pierre. I think it was important what you have highlighted at the end of your speech, and it's very often we forget that for the different maintenance function, the certificate is not mandatory, but it can be useful for them to offer the services to another ECM, and that it was important to mention that. So now I would like to give the floor to Francis, because we had before feedback from the different highway undertaking and keepers. So Francis, I'm not sure, you are here? Okay. Francis will come after because he had to manage the General Assembly of NB Rail. So I think to give him more time to come, I would like to give the floor to another ECM certification body with Fabien Schmidt. Is responsible for ERC, an important ECM certification body. So to Fabien, I would like to ask you a question. Concerning your workload, could you tell us what is or what will be the impact of the new regulation on your activities?
Hello, Natalie. As a certification body, we had the pleasure to follow the ECM certification for now basically 10 years. And it was an interesting phase with also a lot of human reaction in it. And when I think back of how this all started, it was first a very slow reaction of the sector. Until the end of 2012, basically there were no certificates available on the market. But then the year 2013 started, and in January, February, we saw how the number of applications and certificates was increasing tremendously, as we all know. And if this increase would have gone on like it was at the end of May, then in end of July, we would have certified all over Europe. But the very nice human reaction was that on the 1st of June, the world was still turning, and the increase in certificates was flattening considerably, but still steadily increasing over the next few years. And as you know, I would say around 2017, it was clear to see that the majority of companies more or less had been certified. There were still others joining, but those were mainly new companies, smaller companies. Now, at the same time, it started that there were the first volumes of tiering attestations or certifications from non-freight vehicles, but also they were not too many. I will say the real increase in the sector now with all vehicles started around a year ago. And today, now these days, we have applications basically every week. And we see that the sector is taking it definitely serious now. And I hope we will not have the same déjà vu as we had in 2013, that many come in the very last moment. I think there is reason to hope that this does not happen, because also we had quite a long learning phase. Now with the freight wagon ECMs and also the ECMs of other vehicles, we see they have been studying how this works, and it's no longer as frightening as it was at the beginning. So companies are joining more and more and getting into the certification. So yes, there is definitely an increase, and we are also, as a certification body, preparing since quite a while to be able to handle this increase also in the new technical fields, because it's clear that a freight wagon ECM works, or workshop also works different to other vehicles, and we all have to adapt to this. But I think it must be the same interaction between the stakeholders in the sector, respectively the ECM certification bodies and the ECMs that need to be certified, that we have to go this way together and learn from each other to find the proper way to achieve this common goal in the sector, as Gilles said, to homogenize the requirements by the application of this regulation. And I think we are on the right way in the sector.
Okay, sorry. Thank you very much, Fabien, for this first feedback. I hope that we will have in the future a lot of new ECM certificate, and we can share also all this type of feedback in our cooperation of ECM certification bodies. Thank you. I would like to now to give the floor to Francis. Francis is the technical manager ECM certification for TÜV Rheinland Luxembourg, and it's also another ECM certification body. For you, Francis, I have a question. What is for you the main impact of the accreditation and certification schemes concerning the works of conformity assessment bodies, especially for ECM certification bodies?
Thank you, Nathalie, for organizing this webinar and let me the opportunity to give this overview of impact we have identified on the site of TÜV Rheinland. It's true that this scheme needs to be applied by all the ECM certification body by 16th of June 2021 at latest. And for TÜV Rheinland, it was more challenging as our certification body was stated in the UK. And so we need to transfer the activities to continue to issue certificates on European level by end of 2020. So it was a two challenge, but we succeed. And the new scheme was also, I will say, very helpful regarding the previous one for the accreditation scheme. As first of all, the new scheme for accreditation of the ECM certification body is identifying the requirements on the assessment team and no more on the individuals on each auditor. So we need to compose by our database of auditors and assessors the best audit team to fit in and to be in line with the scope of the assessment with the ECM or in line with the maintenance workshop, and to find the best team to perform this assessment and to put the requirements at assessment team was very useful for us. Secondly, there was also the redefinition of the certification committee. Previously, the people were thinking, yes, it's a committee, it's minimum 2 persons. By the new definition, it can be also the decision-making process at the end after the audit can be performed just by one decision maker if he's also fulfilling all the requirements about the certification committee on the level of the knowledge and the other requirements. And finally, at level of the accreditation scheme, the previous one was making reference to the ISO 17020 for inspection, and today the new accreditation scheme is making reference to the ISO 17065 and 17021 for auditing. So it was also helpful to consider that we will see also at level of the certification scheme that the inspection is a method for the audit and not directly an activities to do in complement to the activities of auditing. So for me, these are the three main big improvement at level of the accreditation scheme. The second document, which is new, is the certification scheme, with also several improvements. The first one is that today we have one single unique certification scheme. Previously, there was one certification scheme for ECM and another one for the outsourcing maintenance function. It was not easy to manage these two schemes where the applicant was performing both activities. Today, with one global scheme, it's easier also to implement the requirements of the certification scheme for the full audit activities we need to perform on each ECM, or for the activities of the request for outsourcing maintenance function. The second major improvement is that in the previous scheme, you get two columns, one for auditing, one for inspection. The fact that we consider inspection activities as an audit methods, we could remove this second column, which enhances the implementation of the scheme. And there were also a two-color approach with black text, blue text, with the black text is mandatory, the blue one is a recommendation. It was not easy also to manage this this approach. So by also deleting this two-color approach in the certification scheme was also enhancement to implement and to understand what was expected for us to manage our activities and how to perform our certification and audit activities. Another improvement is that at level of the application request, there are more elements in the certification scheme than what we find in the application form in the regulation. You could extend, for example, this application form to the list of information it's requested to provide to the certification body before it's starting its activities. And this information are very targeting the organization of the applicant to inform the certification body since the beginning how is organized, what are the activities performed internally, what are the activities which are outsourced or partially outsourced, and to allow the certification body to draw up a tailor-made audit program for the applicant, which is very close to its organization, and we can be also adapted during the certification cycle when you have modification in organization by the year. Another point is also that you have a description of the stage 2 of the audit. So the audit is needs to be performed in 2 stages, stage 1 and stage 2. The stage 1 is more, I will say, the audit based on document, and the stage 2, the audit on site. And today the certification scheme is providing for each function a list of attention points that the notified body needs to consider when it's performing its activities. You can make an easy relationship between the requirements and this attention point, but it helps also the different audit team to consider for the stage 2 audit these different attention point and not to repeat a clause by clause as you have already performed in the stage 1, and to have a more I will not say friendly, but it facilitates the activities of the audit team on the field, and you don't have the impression that you are just there to make a check line by line with the regulation if you do it the same on site, but you can more easily perform and organize your audit by having this list of attention point for the stage 2 activities, function by function, so to be adapted also according to the scope of activities of the applicant. The last point that I would like also to make regarding this scheme, there are 2 ones. A big one is the new Annex 5 of the regulation, which is the annual report of the applicant, of the ECM, also for the outsourced permanent function. And this annual report needs to be provided by the applicant to the certification body almost 1 month before the surveillance audit. And as for the application form, when you have a look to this annual report, it's also requesting to provide information on the changes and the organization of the applicant. And also it allows us, I will say we have decided level of the Rhineland to make first an assessment of this annual report to identify the major changes in the organization and to propose to the applicant a change in the audit program if necessary to continue this tailor-made approach between according to its organization on one side and what we will perform as check on the other sides. And the additional big improvement is, for me, the introduction of the status of newcomer for the outsourced maintenance function. It was just defined level of the ECM previously, but it allows today to help people who are coming on the market, who are raising a new company, like for a small maintenance workshop as mobile workshop, to start with their system, to provide the confidence that they have foreseen that they have a system to act properly and to perform properly their activities, to go on the field for the audit, and then to extend the validity after 1 year go for full certification of 5 years, and then they can continue to develop their business, for example. So it's also good to have this newcomer status for the outsourcing maintenance function to enhance newcomer to come on the activities and in the club of the certified maintenance workshop, or also available for outsourced maintenance activities. First, my list of improvement for both schemes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Francis, for this explanation, this deep explanation of what we can have in the certification scheme. Thank you also to explain the different stage and to explain that the process is correctly explained in this certification scheme, and is the reason that we have spent some time to be agreed with the ECM certification body, but also with the sector, to be clear and to be concise in these two very important schemes. Thank you, Francis, for that. Now, I would like to give the floor to Gradus. Oui. To Gradus Kamperman. Gradus Kamperman is the senior inspector in the Dutch NSA. As Alexandra explained in the map, we have also NSA acting as ECM certification body, and with Gradus, we will have some feedback. So for you, I would like to ask you a question. Gradus, when you act as an ECM certification body, could you explain us how this extension of the certificates has changed your previous activity? Because you did before ECM certificate for ECM maintaining freight wagon. Gradus, if you can explain.
Yes, of course, Natalie, and thank you very much for explaining it to all the attendants, and hello everybody. Maybe it's good to have a short introduction about myself and the NSA. I'm working at the Human Environment and Transport Inspectorate in Dutch, the ELT, and we are as NSA acting as an ECM certification body, and as you said, since the regulation 445 for the freight wagons. In the Netherlands, we're the only one. And because we're an NSA acting as an ECM certification body, we're only acting in the Netherlands. So not abroad, but of course the ECM certificates we issue are valid in whole Europe. But besides the ECM certification, that's not the only certificate we issue. We also certificates like the single safety certificates and medical and training institutes, and etc. So the ECM certification are just one of the certificates we issue. To your question, I made your question a little bit wider. Your question is the extension of certificates had changed previous activities, but the extension of certificates has to do with the extension of the regulation. And I think the other speakers have said already a lot about the extension and the change of the new regulation. One of the main topics, of course, when you look at the previous activities, is that the extensions of the scope is not just freight wagons, but it's to all vehicles. It's said enough. But there also are some new articles in it for the safety critical components and the report, the 3-yearly activity report we have to write between the ERA and the ECM certification bodies. And I think that everyone can imagine that when you have a new regulation, it does have a lot of effect in the way of working. So for your process, for your knowledge you need, maybe you must look at the regulations in your own country, must it be changed, yes or not. So, and of course you have the possibility that you get a lot of new applicants. So you need some capacity to fulfill the requirements as an ECM certification body. But we are more certification bodies, so you never know who will come to you for an ECM certification. The first thing we did, we made an overview of the deltas, the difference between the 445 and the 779, not just in theory, but also practically. So you have a regulation, it's written down, but practically, since it's not, is it always clear what you must fulfill? For example, when you're on railway undertaking and you maintenance your own vehicles, must you have an ECM certificate, yes or no? Or can you show it through your SSC application? So that's for us also important, and it means also something for us when you are an ECM and you don't, it is not a mandatory ECM certification, we must check it in our SSC application. So that's also a big change for us. And in that process, we also we need a very good cooperation between us as certification body, but also supervision, how we act in the railway system with each other. When you talk about the certification itself, that is actually your question. What we had to do is to change the documents in the certification process. I don't think the process itself changes a lot when you look at the 445 regulation, because the system is actually the same. But yeah, you need to change the documents within the regulation. So the application form, we use some checklists, we write assessment reports, we have ECM certificates, and they now must comply within the new regulation, of course. So that's also means something for us. These are also changes you must fulfill. And of course, information on the website. And it's always an ongoing situation, but with the new regulation, you must change it immediately, of course. I think that's the process itself, what I said, didn't change very much, but the content of the documents did. And as said, an extension of a regulation has also an impact in the way of your work overall. So I think in the Netherlands, we have the situation, and maybe it's an advantage, I don't know, but we have already since many years experience with maintenance workshops. So the function 4 workshops for the category of all vehicles, and you need a recognition, a license to do the maintenance work on these vehicles. And these are the vehicles which are registered in the NVR, in the vehicle registration, by the Dutch ministry. So for the assessment for that, we use the regulation, ECM regulation Annex 2. And yeah, you can think about it. Must it be mandatory also in the future, or now at this moment when you have an ECM regulation that also writes down the possibilities to outsource maintenance functions? What can be certified? So that's an interesting question in our country, and it has effect, of course, also on our job. So, well, these are some points. Francis already told something about a new accreditation scheme, certification scheme. We also must comply with it. So it does also mean something for us. And I think what's also important, this subject is not really mentioned till now, but maybe it's important for all the people who are listening at this moment, is how are the vehicles at this moment registered in the vehicle registration? Is the ECM right at this moment, yes or not? So in some cases, we have already done some ECM certifications for the 779 regulation, and we find out that not all registrations are fine. So you can get a responsibility which is not right. So I think it's also a very important point to look at when you're an ECM. Are the vehicles written? Is your function also right in the vehicle registration? Well, I'd like to end my little speech, but I think it's also very important to comply with the ECM regulations, because you organize a much higher level, I think, of safety in the railway system. A maintenance management process, a performance of maintenance must be in line and clear, and it needs a good cooperation between ECMs, engineering, manufacture, workshops, railway undertakers, etc. And I think like the freight wagons. I think Fabian said already also with freight wagons was quite new. It's not new anymore, but I still find something that the understanding can be better. So what does it mean in your situation, in your role, and your responsibility in the framework? And I think on the ERA website, you can see a lot of information about it. And also the new guide will help you to figure out for yourself, when I'm an ECM, what's my responsibility? How must I act? And how must I communicate with other parties? So I think it's very important to ask your question again. And also we have already since 2011 an ECM regulation, but this is a new regulation, and sometimes we still find out that it can be improved still. So I hope this must be clear in the framework. So well, I think that's my point. So I explained the previous activity has changed, of course, a lot. The system, I think, not. But well, I hope that my presentation helps you to get more understanding and to find also some information. So thank you for your attention. And I give the floor back.
Thank you a lot, Gradus, especially to point the fact that there is a need to register correctly the ECM in the European Vehicle Register. Thank you for this point. We have discussed a bit during the NSA network, but of course, we have to share our experience on this point. Thank you for that. Now, I would like to give the floor to Geoffrey. Geoffrey, as ECM manager and certified since a long time for the maintenance of wagons, could you tell us what are for you the new challenges to be also certified for other types of vehicle? Do you find differences between the regulation 445 and 779? What are for you the strengths and weaknesses of this new regulation? Geoffrey.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. So, Nathalie, thank you to let me as an ECM manager sorry. Okay. I don't have any return in my headset, so please just, okay, it's okay, so I can start now. Thanks to let me expose as an ECM manager since 2012, my opinion and feelings about extended scope and key challenges given by the new regulation in practice. So I consider that because of the extended scope for all vehicles, especially for locomotives, that involves some real difference in the way that we have to build the ECM system inside the organization. I think we need to fit it depending the concerned types of vehicle. We cannot keep everything on the same basis. For wagon maintenance and technical monitoring, we are historically based on strong former sector convention and standards like RIV or GCU. Wagon were used anywhere and exchanged with efficiency by former railway undertakings decades before ECM regulation with a good efficiency, I would say. So, by the way, the wagon context for concerned ECM function was obviously more a question of standardization of practices and harmonization of minimum requested safety level or running state and specific features you find on wagons. My own experience, let me conclude that if there were, and there is still some differences between maintenance practices on wagons, the global way of thinking maintenance and understanding safety related to these aspects were well accepted and applied with former 445 regulation. ECM functions are quite easy to assign or to share in a dedicated organization and workshop for wagons, I think. In the main case, wagon manufacturers is not so involved in the maintenance process. ECM is in charge of thinking and managing maintenance for the most of procedure or technical aspects according their own maintenance rules, or even if they are following VPI or so on, they are I would say on a standard basis, I would say, for maintenance. 779 regulation gives, in my opinion, a good answer for the most the worst weaknesses we have in the 445 with safety critical components identification, and clearly define the depths of risk assessment you need to produce or to process when you are in front of critical components. I think it explained it quite clearly. I think that it is more complicated for locomotives and track machines. Each railway undertaking has its own consideration, and as in the past, acquired machines that are based on local or national aspects, so the context becomes blurrier. Marshalling machines, infrastructure vehicles, and lots of old locomotives locally used on strict area or industrial networks were usually very specific and produced in very small series with very various build-up. So former railway undertakings had their own dogmas, I would say, for maintenance and setup and safety critical components. Sometimes don't follow any harmonized standards like standards of log pass and so on. So defined setup are tending to fix or enhance features to reach user requirements with specific technical arrangements or design that makes that the manufacturer is a key partner, especially for maintenance of specific components. By the way, contractors and service partners are often mandatory to overhaul some devices because they are the only that have the knowledge and skills to perform it. So for those vehicles, I think risk management is also often supported, in fact, by partners, even if responsibility remains to declare the ECM. So ECM role in some case can be reduced to choose, if it's possible, or to contract or coordinate the most relevant partners to keep safety level as required. So in my opinion, I would say ECM function sharing or decision taking is maybe more complicated or less clear or more changing for other types of vehicle. So I think hierarchy can be completely inverted if ECM has not the technical skills allowing to understand what risk is behind relative maintenance procedure or specific defect on components or whatever. So I think new regulation is well done because we have a strong guidance inside on the way we have to manage the risk, the way we have to manage the safety critical components, and after all, a vehicle is just an amount. A build-up of lots of components, and some of them are clearly critical. The other can become critical in some situation, and so on. So I think we have to enhance the new regulation or to complete it with guidance like the last one that explain or allows keepers and railway undertakings to better build contract or to define the way to get the skills and the qualification they don't own, and to be able to officially report relative risks and responsibilities to manufacturer, for example, because in some case you don't have any other possibility. I think also regarding CSM, that there is a strong point to enhance, which is the way to process risk management. And the way we have to consider the necessity to have the support of assessment body, because in fact it's quite difficult when you perform risk analysis on components and so on. I think the current GSG task force we can follow these days with broken wheels and Greenbelt Bridge show us some example that even if the whole sector contributes and the institution are there and everybody try to find some big solution or some good solution, assessment is a really complex process to follow, and the risk remains at the end, always in the end of the keepers, ECM and railway undertaking. So that was the point I want to notice, and thank you for your attention. Thanks.
Okay, thank you a lot, Geoffrey, for this first feedback. Thank you also to precise that we don't have to forget the risk-based analysis and the link with the CSM, and we have work about this to explain, to follow the CSM, and it is a big challenge also. Thank you for that. Now we arrive at the moment that we will answer to your questions. I'm not very surprised because I was a bit aware that you will have a lot of questions, but due to the tags, I can say that we will start with the question receiving the most tags from the moment, but don't worry, we will answer to all questions. After this webinar, we have made a picture of your question and you will answer to your question, no problem. So first, the question that receives the more points, if I can say that, is the question about safety critical components. How far will this approach be harmonized? That it was not an easy question. I think I can give the floor to Jean-Pierre, maybe, to explain what will be the next step, what was the work already done by Sensenelec in collaboration with the agency. Please, Jean-Pierre, if you can give some explanation about that, it will be very useful.
You're welcome, Nathalie. Just a few words about, in order to explain what we did before concerning the safety critical component guideline. Our representative, Mr. Raguzza Giuseppe from Trenitalia, joined the task force in order to build the ECM guideline. And the output of this task force was to ask to the Sensenelec WG48 group to write an SCC guideline, and it was done last year. We wrote with Giuseppe Raguzza a document which is in inquiry now till August, I would say. After that time, if we all agree about what we did within the WG48, it will be voted as a technical report and launched for you all.
Okay, thank you, Jean-Pierre, for this clarification. The second question was more about the return in operation. The question was, what is the role of the ECM or highway undertaking? Which type of exchange we can have concerning the information about return in operation? I'm sorry, Jean-Pierre, but I would like to ask you also this question because you will present more the highway undertaking. So for the return in operation, can you say what is the role of ECM concerning the return to operation that you are expected when you are a highway undertaking?
Good question, Nathalie. We try to define more clearly what does it mean within the ECM guide. I don't remember well, but there is two aspects in order to let a vehicle to return in operation. Is that and to put it once again in operation. So you have the first step is to for the maintainer to just to say to the fleet manager, yes, the maintenance has been delivered properly, and you can the step is done. And the second step is to allow now to let the fleet manager to the railway undertaking just to say you can use your vehicle once again. There is two steps, and we try to define it clearly within the ECM regulation, the ECM guideline. If I understand well the question.
Yes, thank you, Jean-Pierre, for that. Maybe Gilles, perhaps you can say something about this return in operation, because I'm sure that you are also involved like a representative of the majority of keepers. So, Gilles, if you want to add something on this point.
Yeah, thank you, Nathalie. Thank you, Jean-Pierre, as well for the first inputs. Of course I won't, because this topic has been discussed, I don't remember, 9 years, 10 years, even perhaps more in freight, which is quite complicated with the fragmentation of the roles between the different entities. But in terms of return to operation, I think the important thing to mention is what Geoffrey said also in his intervention. We have by chance a very standardized world of exchange of information between RUs and keepers and ECM in the freight domain, which is now the GCU. And if you look at the GCU, there is indeed an obligation for the ECM via the keeper or directly to inform the RU on any restriction which might occur after maintenance of the wagons. So basically, there is no, let's say, formal exchange of information, apart in the case there would be restriction which the RU needs to know. And that also helps to separate the different, let's say, responsibilities between an ECM and an RU. So yes, it's already in place. It's working as long as nobody is questioning the principle introduced already 7 or 8 years ago.
Okay, thank you, Gilles, for that. Now, if we go in the next question, I think it will be more a question for you, Gradus. What are the elements of the annex who will be assessed for highway undertakings in the single safety certificate process? Can you tell us some points about which type of elements will be assessed in this process?
Yes, I can try to give an explanation. I think it's when you are a railway undertaking and you're also the ECM for your own operation, your own vehicles, we look at all the requirements is set in the Annex 2 of the regulation. So I think the first one is, the most important one is, of course, the function 1. So the management function. And it's also depending, are you fulfilling the other function by yourself, or have you outsourced some function? So this is also a very important question. So depending on the situation, but the Annex 2 is our basis to look at when we have an SSC application. So when in our SSC application we filled in also the requirements, it's also written in the ECM guide which requirements are fitting also with the SSC. So take a look at that, and then you can see how we comply with that. I hope it's satisfying.
Okay, thank you for this explanation. I would like just to add that in the revised guide, we have also in the annex 2 tables concerning it's a cross check between the requirements of SMS and also with the requirements for ECM. So it could be useful also for people who would like to have more explanation to read carefully the guide and the annexes. Now, the next question, and I think in this question, maybe we can have the opinion of our ECM certification body, Fabien and Francis. The question is, how can the quality and objectivity of the certification be guaranteed? How is possible to guarantee this quality and objectivity of the certification? Please, Fabien or Francis, if you if you can give us an answer or exchange on this point.
It's my pleasure to answer this, Francis, if you want to add something. In principle, the system has not changed. We are still controlled by our accreditation body on a regular basis. We still have to prove how we select our staff, how we conduct the audits. There are several mechanisms involved in the certification to guarantee that we act neutral, objectively, and this is all on the formal basis. In the end, I think the sector speaks, and it's word of mouth. And if a body would not act in the proper way, I think this would very quickly go around. And so in the end, I think there's a kind of self-regulating process in this. Of course, as a certification body, we have a responsibility. We try to fulfill it as good as we can. We're open for improvement anytime. But as I said, there's a lot being done that we work in a homogeneous way as well. Francis, please, if you want to add something.
Yes, thank you, Fabien. I will add also that on our accreditation, there are some main points to be considered. This is the competence, the independence, and the impartiality. And 3 of them are monitored on annual basis through the surveillance audit of our accreditation bodies, but we're also making an internal monitoring through our own internal audit, and it's also recommended to our technical managers to perform if they want, or if they have doubt, or if they have a new assessment team, to make a monitoring of their own team. You don't need to think to relax that once you have the certificate, the job is done. Of monitoring of our activities inside to assure that these 3 aspects of competence, independence, and impartiality are always covered. And that's why also we have also a stage of auditing and assessment and a stage of independence decision maker with no conflict between these 2 layers within our companies at project level.
Okay. Thank you, Fabien and Francis, for this. I think we arrive at the end, so don't worry. If you don't answer to your question, you will answer by email after. Now, I would like to come back to the last slide that it was important to share with you. It's for the upcoming free ERA webinar. We have one in June 16 and another in 30. I don't know if you, Torsten, if you want to say something about it, and thank you to close this webinar.
Okay. So that's the end of this webinar. We would like to thank you very, very much to our speakers in particular, and not only for your contribution, but also for your enthusiasm and support. And If you would like to stay updated on our activities, please sign in our database by selecting the button on My ERA profile on the top of our webpage. And as Nathalie said before, we have more events this year. In particular, the 16th of June is the launch of the European Rail Safety Climate Survey that was developed to enhance rail safety across Europe. So this is an important date to note. It's also a historic date. We have the 5 years fourth railway package in June. So we look forward to meeting you soon again. I think there's enough occasions. Stay safe. See you soon. And bye-bye. Thank you.